to your local church should be easy, and with Tidely, it is. Just download the app and securely register your credit or debit card. You're done. Now you can give during church services or anywhere else. Use Tidely to give a one-time gift or set up recurring donations. It's that simple. It's fast, secure, and easy to use. Tidely, the simplest way to give to your local church.
To sing it with your heart and soul? Yeah? Okay, here we go. In the darkness, we were waiting without hope, without life, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. Come on, we sing it out. Praise forever to the King of
Death could not hold you down. You are the risen King, seated in majesty. You are the risen King, 'cause death could not hold you down. You are the risen King, seated in majesty. You are the risen King. Hallelujah. You have won the victory. Hallelujah. You have won it all for me. Death could not hold you down. You are the risen King, seated in majesty. You are the risen King.
Together, we are creating a new future for the Valley because of your generosity. Your financial support is being used to produce content and create a loving community that is bringing hope to hurting people during the COVID pandemic and quarantine. Your giving equips Newsoul Ribera with tools to provide access to our services and support for people who can only meet with us by phone. Because you give, the hungry are being fed, and we've launched a winter warmth campaign to protect people in the Valley from the cold this season. With your help, in 2021, we're not slowing down, but ramping up a campaign to expand our digital reach to help and inspire more kids, students, singles, families, and seniors. Your giving is making a difference in the community. 1 Timothy 6:17-19 says, "Don't be full of yourselves and obsessed with money, which is here today and gone tomorrow. Go after God, who piles on all the riches we could ever manage. Do good. Be rich in helping others. Be extravagantly generous. If you do that, you'll build a treasury that will last, gaining life that is truly life." We have quick and easy ways for you to give. Online, newsoulribera.com. By text BLESS to 94000. By app, download the Tithely app. Or by mail, Newsoul Ribera, P.O. Box 574, Ribera, New Mexico 87560. To receive text updates from Newsoul Ribera, text Ribera to 94000.
Hi, Newsoul Ribera. Happy Easter. If you're joining with us for the first time, I'm so glad that you're joining with us today. My name is Steve, and I'm the lead pastor here at Newsoul Ribera, and I just want to welcome you. I'm so glad you're joining us. Regardless of your faith background or where you're at in your life right now, you're welcome, and I'm so glad you're with us today, connecting with us. I bet you can guess what I'm going to talk about. The resurrection of Jesus from the dead. That's what Christians all over the world are talking about this weekend. It's a really big deal. It's our Super Bowl. And it's a really big deal because the story of Jesus isn't worth telling if he's dead. If Jesus is dead, then you don't ever hear about Jesus. There is no church. There's no me. There's no Methodists or Presbyterians or Baptists or evangelicals. There's no Christians of any kind, of any brand. There's no Jesus. You wouldn't have heard of him. He was a carpenter from Palestine, born 2,000 years ago. He didn't own lands. He didn't win any great victories. He wasn't the governor of anything. This is it today, Easter. This is everything. If Jesus doesn't resurrect from the dead, we're not having this conversation. So who is Jesus? That's a question I think everyone should ask themselves. It's one of the most important questions I think you could ever ask yourself in life is, who is Jesus? You see, if you're new to Newsoul Ribera, we don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God. We don't believe in him because the Bible tells us so. In fact, if Jesus isn't raised from the dead, there is no Bible. There's no reason for a Bible. When I was a kid, for Easter, I was very immature and very dumb, obviously. And I used to think that Easter meant like, yes, we win. Like against all the other religions of the world, the Hindus and Muslims and Buddhists, like we win. Our guy rose from the dead, yours did. And it's kind of like we won, like it was a game or something. I'm grateful that I've matured in many ways. But especially in this way, I realized that Jesus' resurrection from the dead isn't like winning a game. It's so much bigger than that, so much more significant than that. We believe in Jesus and that he rose from the dead because Matthew told us so. Matthew wouldn't have written his book and we wouldn't have his letter today if Jesus didn't raise from the dead. Because he was an eyewitness. He was a Jewish tax collector. And he writes about the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. Peter, one of Jesus' followers, dictated his eyewitness account to Mark in the gospel. And he writes 2 letters that also prove that he believed that Jesus rose from the dead, that he saw him, that he talked with him, that he met him after he had come out of the tomb and out of the grave. Luke, the Greek physician, the doctor, he thoroughly investigated, he said, all the claims made about Jesus. He tried to separate fact from fiction, legend from truth, rumor from reality. And he gave us an eyewitness account of all that he had found out. James, Jesus' brother, what would it take for you to believe that your brother was your Lord and your God? Well, that's what James said about his brother, that he was his Lord and that he was his God. Paul, who enters the pages of history as Saul, who's someone who hates the church. If you hate the church, if you hate Christians, you hate Christianity, you're in good company, because Paul, the Apostle Paul wrote 2/3 of the New Testament. He also hated the church and he hated the Jesus movement. He hated Christianity until he met Jesus after Jesus had risen from the dead. And John, whose words we're going to dig into, and what I want you to do for the next few minutes, I want you to take off your church hat. I know it's Easter and you have, you're used to this may be the day, one day you connect with church, but I want you to take off your religious hat for a moment, your superstitious hat for a minute, your church hat for a minute, and I want you to think just as a human as we dig into the words of John. John, his account that we're going to dig into, he wrote it down. He was an old man, probably in his 80s or 90s, and he's looking back on his life and his moments with Jesus. And he shares his account with us. And in this account, he tells us about his moments after Jesus rose from the dead. And we're going to dig into that together. You see, nobody, including Jesus' closest friends and his closest followers, nobody expected nobody. There was no one at the tomb that day on Sunday morning, on an Easter morning, saying, 10, 9, 8, cue the sun, 7, 6, get the stone ready, 5, 4. Nobody was doing that because they didn't expect there to be a body. They didn't expect no body in the tomb. In fact, none of Jesus' followers expected a crucifixion at all. Their version of a Messiah was somebody who was going to change things politically, who's going to change things economically, who's going to create justice in the world, who's going to change the physical circumstances of their lives. See, the problem with Jesus wasn't what he taught, and it wasn't what he did. The problem that Jesus' enemies had with him is who he claimed him that he was, that what he said about himself. And the tipping point was when Jesus resurrected a man after 4 days in the grave. We're going to pick up John's account now. Just listen to it as a human, okay? He's just telling us what he saw. And this tipping point was, like sometimes you hear of moments, maybe you experienced it, where there might have been somebody who collapses and they're no longer breathing. And maybe a child falls into the water, and maybe through CPR and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, you're able to bring them back, but they still had brain activity and all of that. Well, Jesus resurrected a man who had been in the grave for 4 days. In the grave. They had wrapped his body in linen. He was already embalmed. His sister said he probably already stinks. His body was starting to decompose. And Jesus went to the gravesite and spoke his name and called him out, and he came back to life. And when Jesus' enemies found out about this, they decided this man has to die. You see, Jesus' enemies were the chief priests. They were the Jewish rulers. They were the temple priests. They spoke the Mosaic law, the law of Moses, to the people. And they hated Jesus because he was a threat to them, because, see, the Roman Empire was occupying Israel. But for these Jewish priests, these rulers of Israel, the Romans let them rule as long as they could keep the people under control, as long as the people didn't become a problem to Rome. So these Jewish priests were wealthy, and they were powerful, and they had authority. And they liked those things very much. And if Jesus started to gather a following around him, and the Romans thought that he was a threat, they would remove these priests from their position, their power, and their wealth. When this happened, when the resurrection of Lazarus happened, the news, as you can imagine, spread throughout the surrounding towns and villages. Like, this is the Messiah. We have been waiting. This is the guy who has been, his prophecy of him coming has been foretold. He's the chosen one. He's the one who's going to overthrow the Roman Empire. He's going to be the king. He's going to restore Israel to its rightful place in the world. And it wasn't that too few people believed in Jesus, it was that too many believed in Jesus. The conspiracy and the plot to kill Jesus was on. And in the next few moments and days afterwards, the Passover was about to begin. Now, the Passover for the Jews was like Thanksgiving or the 4th of July or Christmas for us. And the Passover was where relatives would come in from out of town, and they'd gather together and they would feast, and they'd enjoy each other's company, and they would celebrate. It was a holiday. And it was happening in the biggest city in Jerusalem. Jesus was going to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. See, the Passover was the time when God brought the nation of Israel out of Egypt when they were slaves, and created a special relationship with him. And the city was packed with people for a long holiday weekend. And as Jesus enters the city, Jesus' enemy's worst nightmare happens. Thousands of people line the streets as he enters the gates of the city. And they are chanting his name, and they are praising his name, and they treat him like he's a king or a general coming back from battle. And Jesus' enemies are like, we've got to get rid of this man. We've got to get him away from the crowds. We've got to get him isolated. We've got to arrest him, put him through some type of quick trial, get him to the Romans, and let them crucify him. Because we don't want to be responsible for the death of this man, but we've got to get rid of him. And Judas, one of Jesus' followers, the 12, gives Jesus' enemies their opportunity. He decides to trade inside information for money. He goes to them and tells them, I'll tell you where Jesus is going to be and where you can find him away from the crowds. So they paid him for this information. Now, Jesus was enjoying the Passover meal. Judas went back to the 12, rejoined them. And Jesus' followers were thinking, this is it. I feel like momentum is building. Like, we've seen this man do miracles. He's calmed the sea. He's opened blind eyes. He's healed people who were lepers. He's healed people who were lame forever. He's raised somebody from the dead. The momentum in the crowds are shifting. They're chanting his name. Something big's about to happen. And they felt like they were on the ground floor of something brand new. And when the Passover meal was being served, Jesus got the bread and he got the wine and he said, I am creating a new covenant with you. This body and this wine is a new covenant, a new agreement, a new contract with you. Now, Jewish people at that time, people in Israel, they knew all about covenants because that was what their relationship with God was created from. It was a contract, an agreement that they would be the chosen people of God and God would be their God. And if they met a certain amount of requirements, God would bless them and watch over them and keep them. And Jesus was saying, I am replacing that old agreement and I'm making a new agreement, new covenant. And this agreement isn't just for Israel. It's for the entire world. It's for all of humanity. And it only has one command, not 10 commands, not 600 commands, just one. That you love one another as I have loved you. So the meal is over. Sure enough, Jesus is vulnerable. Judas delivers on his word. The temple guards see Judas kiss Jesus on the cheek and they arrest him. And they whisk him away to an illegal trial. They're not allowed to have trials at night, but they did in secrecy. They brought witnesses in who lied about Jesus. They couldn't get their story straight, but it didn't really matter because the verdict was already done before the trial even started. They convicted Jesus guilty of crimes that he needed to be executed for. So they take him to Rome and they present him to Pontius Pilate, who was the governor of Rome, and said, you need to execute this man. And Pilate examines him and examines the evidence and realizes that they just hate Jesus. They're jealous of Jesus. And this is all a lie. It's a ruse to get him killed. And Pilate says, I don't find anything wrong with this man. They don't relent. So he says, okay, I'll whip him. So he whips Jesus with 39 lashes. His body is torn apart. He is bleeding out everywhere. And he figures that if they see him bleeding and broken, that they'll relent and they'll say, okay. But no, they say, we want him crucified. And he said, why? He's done nothing to deserve death. And the Jews say, if you don't crucify him, you are no friend of Caesar. And then Pilate says, do you want me to crucify your king? And the chief rulers of Israel, the priests, said, we have no king but Caesar. So Pilate washes his hands and says, I'm innocent of this guy's blood. His blood is on your hands. I am innocent of the death. I'm not responsible for the death of Jesus. So he hands him over to him and Jesus to them, and he agrees to crucify Jesus. And Jesus is on the cross. He's bleeding out. And we pick up John's words now. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved, how he refers to himself, standing nearby, he said to her, woman, here is your son. And to the disciple, here is your mother. From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. Jesus took care of his mom. And then Jesus said, it is finished. And with that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Jesus died. The man who saw it, John, who's writing this, has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He testifies so that you also may believe. So John is saying, I'm writing to you, reader. I'm writing to you, listener. I am telling you that this happened so that you may believe. Well, believe what, John? That the wannabe Messiah 2,000 years ago on the other side of the planet was crucified by the Roman Empire like thousands before him? That there were corrupt politicians? That there was a conspiracy to protect the powerful and the wealthy? Okay. I mean, we're with you on that, John. But John continues. He says, later, Joseph of Arimathea. And those of you who are science and data and like empirical evidence kind of people, these are names and places of people you can actually identify. They were real people. He asked Pilate for the body of Jesus, and with Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away. He was accompanied by Nicodemus and brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with the spices in strips of linen, and this was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. What do you do with 75 pounds of embalming spices? You embalm someone because they believed that Jesus was going to do what all dead people do: stay dead. They placed a Roman seal on the tomb after they got their servants to roll a giant stone in front of it, saying that if anyone broke into this tomb, they would die. And then they placed Roman guards in front of the tomb, battle-hardened Roman centurions, to keep anyone from stealing the body. The apostles disappear into the city, and we don't know where they went exactly. But if Jesus was dead, there was no movement to keep alive. They weren't planning and plotting, how do we keep this going now that Jesus is dead? Because it was built on who Jesus was and not what he taught. So that when he died, if the Son of God was dead, the movement that he began also died. Then all of his followers had just wasted 3.5 years of their lives following a magician, a teacher, but ultimately a disappointment because they believed he could actually change things. But early on Easter morning, early on the Sabbath, a Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene, a woman whose life had been changed by Jesus, he had lifted her and her dignity. She went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, that's John, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." You see, she didn't say that he rose from the dead. They say they took his body because nobody expected nobody. So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running. But the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. Now, I can imagine that when John is writing this, he's an old man now, and Peter's already been executed in Nero's Rome, and he's chuckling. I beat him. I outran him to the tomb. And it says that he bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. See, John's being really transparent with us. He ran to the tomb, but he didn't go inside because it was dark. And a dead body might be in there, or it was in there. And there's strips of linen there, and he doesn't know what he's going to find in there. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb, because that's what Peter always did. He just ran straight into everything. And he saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Now you tell me, what thieves steal a body and unwrap the body of all the linen and disembalm the body? Finally, the other disciple, John, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside. And he saw and he believed. John is telling us here, when he walked in there, suddenly he realized everything had changed. You see, even Jesus' closest friends doubted and no longer believed. So if you doubt and you no longer believe, you're in great company. John saw with his own eyes, and then he believed that Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God, he didn't come to be a king in the way he had always thought, but something more, that Jesus was someone more. He may have said to himself, so if Jesus rose from the dead, then that means he got it. He finally understood. After the resurrection, Jesus appeared to his followers. He even made breakfast for them on the beach. He walked with them and talked with them. They touched him. Many people saw him alive. But there was one of the 12 that wasn't with them and hadn't seen Jesus yet. And he figured that he had wasted 3.5 years of his life on this wannabe Messiah who did magic tricks and taught love. He had faith and it died. He had hope and it was crushed. He had trusted and it was disappointed. Now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciple told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where his nails were, put marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Thomas was not superstitious. He wasn't going to take it on faith anymore. He wasn't going to take it on trust anymore. He would say, I did believe, and I watched my belief and hope bleed to death on a cross. I saw it get chewed up and spit out by the corrupt and the powerful. You see, nothing changes in this world. It never will. I'm done with hope and faith. I need more than to take yours or anyone else's word ever again. I need proof this time. And a week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them this time, though the doors were locked. And Jesus came and stood among them, and he said, peace be with you. And he said, peace be with you, because if someone shows up when all the windows and doors are locked, and they weren't there when you locked them, you're going to freak out. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Jesus showed up to talk to Thomas. He showed up to talk to one person. One person was that important to him. How did Jesus know what to say to Thomas? He knew exactly what Thomas needed. He knew what Thomas was struggling with. He said, stop second guessing, Thomas. Stop hesitating. Stop asking, well, what about and what if and how do you explain? Jesus said, here is your proof and your answers to your questions. Believe what your eyes see and what your ears hear, what your fingers and hands tell you. Then Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. Thomas got it. He understood after all the teaching, after all the miracles, nothing else made it come clear to him. But when he saw Jesus alive again, he understood who he was talking to and who Jesus really was. Then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. But blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Jesus said, you believe in me because you've seen me. And none of these others around you, these other followers, none of them believed either until they saw. And John is writing these words of Jesus, and it's almost like he's saying, you, reader, you in the future, you who will hear this story one day. It's like Jesus is saying, wherever you are and whenever you are, blessed are you who believe, even though you haven't seen like these have seen. Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Why should we believe you, John, as you write this? Because the buried body of Jesus came back to life. And it proved that he really was more than a moral teacher and a magician or a religious figure. If John were here today, instead of me talking to you and telling you what he saw and what he touched and what he heard, this is what he would say. I recorded these things for you, that you may believe, like I believe. Like those who were with Jesus that day believe, that he rose from the dead, that you may have life. Not existence, but life. For God so loved the world, John would say, that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, shall not be lost to God, but have eternal life. This is the good news. This is the gospel. We hope that this Easter you would believe John's account. And we invite you, just like John did, to trust in Jesus. After this song, there will be some information that comes up on the screen that tells you how to connect with us and how we can help you in your journey to experience the life we've been talking about. I invite you to join us in this song as we sing together.
How great the chasm that lay between us, how high a mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Oh, who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross is spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. So hallelujah, sing it out. Hallelujah, praise the Lord who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, hallelujah, praise the Lord who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. What hope we have in Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus. Thank you. You're not distant, you're not far away from us. You're near, closer than our skin, Jesus. Jesus, oh Jesus, 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 friend forever, amazing. Jesus, 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 friend forever. Came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe out of the silence.